It will just be part of their life. That will just be part of their life. So this is what we're gathered here for, and it is to understand what this whole thing is about. Because unless we're not able to understand what it is, there's no way we can defend ourselves from it. Or there's no way, if we don't recognize the threat, there's no way you're going to be able to accept it as a threat. Right? Or many times you just think, okay, something is bad, okay, this is not good. But what is not good? How do you speak to your children about it? How do the children understand what is going on here? So there are these many aspects of these LGBT things that we're going to speak about today that will not only give you a fundamental understanding of the topic at hand, right? It will not only give you this fundamental understanding of the topic at hand, but inshallah will give you fundamental framework and fundamental tools that you can use and apply in other facets of life. For example, atheism, it may be modernism, it may be any other interpretation, new interpretations about Quran and Hadith. The newer, it's like an iPhone, right? Every time there's a new version, every time there will be newer thoughts and ideologies that will emerge. This year it's going to be this, and then a couple of decades from now it's going to be something else. It's like the new trend that will keep on continuing. So unless we base ourselves on a foundation, then we have to base ourselves on the foundation to have a foundation so we can understand all of them and defend ourselves from all of them. So it has to be one to rule and understand all of them, and how to properly distance ourselves and understand the threat. So we'll start with the intro. We'll be talking about what are we talking about, the main questions we're tackling, and where are we today in terms of LGBT, and then Islamic paradigm. That will be one of the most important part of this segment. Most of the today will just be about Islamic paradigm. Paradigm means our worldview, how we look at reality. How we look at reality, that is what paradigm means. And understanding how we look at reality changes everything, right? For example, there's a saying that goes, what is it? Architects' best design is is better saying, like, it's the architect's ideal design is the engineer's worst nightmare, or something like that, right? So because they're looking at the same design differently, right? One architect wants to make a building that levitates. Now the engineer needs to figure out how that will work, right? So it's because they're looking at the same thing. There's the same thing. It's the same blueprint that they're looking at, but they're looking at different ways. So that's the same. Like, we have to look at from the Islamic perspective. Right? There'll be different perspectives that people will look at one thing, but we have to look at the Islamic perspective and teach our children to look at this from the Islamic perspective. Right? I give this one example about the letter M. Right? You write down letter M, and you can do this exercise with your children or with ourselves. You write down letter M, and you turn it upside down. What does it become? W. You put on this one side, it becomes E. On the other side, it becomes a 3. So the same letter can be represented or misunderstood 4 different ways. But it's the same thing. It's the same there. So it depends on your perspective. So when we go to school, then we are taught one perspective. They're not going to teach you Risalat and Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're not going to teach you our arguments for the existence of Allah. When you go to university, they're not going to teach you that, right? What are they going to teach you? They're going to secular. That's what secular means. But when our children come home, it is our responsibility to teach them what is the Islamic way. Right? It's one of the messages that you want to take from this whole class or this whole segment is understand that there is an Islamic way. No matter what the media is saying, whatever the government is saying, whatever the school system is saying, whatever anyone is saying, at the end of the day, there is an Islamic perspective. And we have to train our children to ask this question, Baba, I was at school, or Mom, I was at school, and my teacher said this. I heard that there is an Islamic way. What is the Islamic way about this? Or the children are in maktab classes, so they ask the teacher that I heard this. What is the Islamic way about this? What does Islam say? We have to train them because Islam will have different views, right? Islam will have different views because Islam is a distinct perspective. So inshallah, that's where we're gonna delve deeper into this Islamic perspective and more. We'll talk about more about that. And inshallah, at the end, it's usually one of the favorites of this segment is we're going to talk about fallacies and debunking their arguments. That's going to be one of the last segments. If we have chance, inshallah, we'll go through that, inshallah. Any questions until now? And anytime, inshallah, feel free to ask questions. We'll see if I can answer right away. If not, we'll take the questions during the end, inshallah. So the main questions that we're tackling is why homosexual behavior is prohibited in Islam. Why is it haram in Islam? Right? That is one thing that we will understand why it is prohibited in Islam. Because previously it seemed intuitive, right? It was only through very recently that homosexual behavior was accepted in society. Previously it was intuitive, cross culture it was intuitive and was prohibited. So, and another thing is, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroy a nation for this behavior? An entire nation was destroyed for this. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroy a whole nation for this? And because the claim is, what's the harm? Right? That's going to the big argument. What's the harm? It's two consenting adults. They want to do what they're doing is behind closed doors. They're not involving nothing. They're not bothering anyone. Why is God bothered by what these adults are doing? Right? Why is anyone bothered? It's two consenting adults. Right? That is because, you understand, everything, mind works in different ways. Right? We search for easy explanation and easy understanding. So they make it very simple. That, oh, what's the harm? But no, there is actually a very big harm and very grave harm. And that's part of the segment that will show the harms, because there is no end to it. There is no end to it. There is no stopping it. There is no way. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned this story in countless verses of the Quran. And where we're today, when we look at the society and the culture around in which we're growing up and in which we're living, in which our children are growing up, how does this world reflect the idea of LGBT? How is it portrayed into these media? So we look at literature. There is a very famous Lumberjane, that's a magazine. Actually, it's a popular comic book series, and this is just it's for teenagers, and the protagonist is trans woman. The trans woman is protagonist. It is literally for teenagers. It is for teenagers. It's not for adults. It's for teenagers. You have annual rainbow book list. There is something called annual rainbow book list. LGBT books ranging from infants or very young, 2-3 years old, bedtime stories that consist of LGBT characters, until 18 years old, right? Covering that whole that childhood. So instead of, you will have prince, like originally prince and princess, you'll have two princes, right? Now the prince will be two different. Now it will be same gender or two. So you'll have these things, and there's something called drag queen story hours, and this is something very scary. This is something that is actually happening in my where I'm from, Quebec, Montreal. The close by library of ours, they have these things called drag queens, and drag queen story hour. Drag queens, there are men who dress up like women, and they go to these bars and they dance, right? And so these kind of people. And they don't wear just women clothing, they're flamboyant women clothing. Flamboyant, they will wear big wigs and flamboyantly trying to show that we're women, and very makeup and all that. But they're men, they're boys, they're men. So these people, they have their whole system online where you can book them. You can literally book them to come to your school. And when I was in my just not too far from where I live, the local library actually used to book them, or it still books them, and they come to our local library, and the children come there and they read the story time. They read these books. And media, you have an overrepresentation. You have Sesame Street has LGBT characters, and if you didn't know, now you know SpongeBob, he's asexual, right? Of course, because Disney can do that right away. So it's Happy Pride Month. SpongeBob is asexual. Khalas. No discussion about it. It's our copyright. We can choose whatever he wants to be. Next month, maybe it's going to be something else, right? But that makes an effect on the children. Imagine the children seeing this. And then you have the Legend of Korra. That's also a very famous series. The female character is what? It's a lesbian. And you have another, nowadays, even Marvel. Even Marvel is very, very big into this. You'll have LGBT characters in Marvel. You'll have message like "love is love." All these slogans, even found in Marvels. And when we spoke about drag queens, there's something called child drag queen, which I will leave for right now. So let's talk about time. So let's talk about Islamic paradigm. Now, paradigm. So now Islamic paradigm, is there a way to put the brightness more high? Brightness is full? No, it's okay. 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 Now I can see your beautiful faces. Okay. So when I was Islamic paradigm. So what is paradigm? What does paradigm mean? When we talk about paradigm, then it means a simple definition: how you look at reality, how you view the world. Like I said, everyone has different ways to look at reality. Everyone has their own perspective. My perspective will not be the same as your perspective. It's very different, right? It's very different perspective. So that's what paradigm means. Worldview. It's how you view the world, how you look at reality, the lenses that you use. So basically, for example, if I'm wearing green lens, and you tell me this desk is white, right? What will I say? No, it's green. No matter what you tell me, no matter what proofs you write up for me, you can write up essays. What will I say? This desk is green. Why is that the case? It's because I'm wearing green lens. That is the reason. When our children are literally going through the education of secularism, they're going through an atheistic, or not necessarily atheistic, but a secular, where there's nothing, no interference of religion. When they start adopting these ideologies, these lens, so unless they take out these lens and understand from the Islamic perspective, they will not be able to see. They will see the problem and they will say because they have the atheistic worldview, right? They will have that worldview, so they will just think, oh, this is it. This is how it's supposed to be. It's because they are not looking from the other perspective. So they're not looking from the other perspective. That's why we need to teach our children to look from the Islamic perspective, to understand that there is an Islamic way, that there is an Islamic ideology, there is an Islamic methodology, there is an Islamic understanding. So another example, for those who have their glasses, or are you able to see your glasses, or you see through your glasses? Right? For those who have their eyes, right? I hope everyone here. So are you able to see your eyes, or you see through your eyes? Right? You see through your eyes. So that's why many times when people they see the history of LGBT and like, I don't see an issue with that. I don't see an issue with that. Why is that the case? It's because they have adopted not an Islamic. Their lens are not Islamic. Their lens are non-Islamic, and they don't know that. But they don't know that because they grew up in this society, in this culture, that they've just adopted that worldview and they don't know that. And that's why James Anderson, who actually wrote an entire book about this, and he concludes this: worldviews also largely determine people's opinions on matters of ethics and politics, where a person thinks about all these things: abortion, euthanasia. We may think that my opinion is unbiased. My opinion is unbiased, but that is not the case. Many times it is not unbiased. It is because of those underlying assumptions that we have. So now comes to probably the most fun part of the presentation, which I'm sure you guys will enjoy. That we've been speaking about this whole worldview, right? We've been speaking about different worldviews. We've been speaking about that. There's an atheist worldview. There's a Christian worldview. There's a secular worldview. There's a modern worldview. There's a liberal worldview. There's a feminist worldview. There's an LGBT worldview. There are all these worldviews around us. And then there's an Islamic worldview. So now we've been talking about worldviews. So the question is, how do you shift and how do you come to the Islamic worldview? How do you teach your children to disregard the different worldviews that we may be indoctrinated? To disregard that and to adopt the Islamic worldview. How do you do that? That is the main thing. And it's called paradigm shift. That before we were thinking about something else, before we were thinking different manner, but now I will think this way. So paradigm shift is an important change that happens when the usual way of thinking about or doing something is replaced by a new and different way. So it's like an aha moment. And that's why children or many adults, many times, we will have this aha moment. I will show you, inshallah, three paradigm shifts. Three paradigm shifts that will have this aha moment that, yes, now I understand why it's haram. Now I understand why homosexuality is prohibited. Now I understand why this does not make sense. Now I understand why Islam says this. And how it's different from Islam. How it's different. Islam is different. So just to give you an example of what paradigm shift is, you have this image in front of you, right? Now you tell me, what do you guys see over here? Female in a thobe? A coat. So female, old, young, middle-aged? Okay, who sees a middle-aged sister? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, middle-aged. Who sees anything else? Old? Okay, raise hands for old sister, old woman. Yes, old woman. You guys see both? Does everyone see both? Right? So for both, this right here, if you want to see the old sister, the old lady, you have to see this is the big nose of the old lady, and this is the mouth of the old lady, this is the chin, the hair, these are the eyes of the old lady. Now you'll see the old lady. And if you want to see the young, then she's looking away. This is the jawline, she's looking away. And you guys see the both, right? So what's happening? This is called paradigm shift. Before you were able to see one way, but now after training, there's an aha moment. Aha! Now I see the other way. Now I see the old lady also. Now I see the young lady also. Right? So that is called the paradigm shift. And inshallah, this is what we're going to go through. I'm going to show you what Islam says, like right here. I will show you, so 1, 2, 3. I will show you what Islamic paradigm and Western paradigm. So I will show you what Islam says, and then when I show you what Western paradigm says, like, now I get it. Now it clicks. Aha. That aha moment. Now it clicks. It's going to be very similar to what happened here. It will click. It will be put into place right where it's supposed to be. Now I can see both. Everyone can see both, right? Let's look at another example. Inshallah, this is going to be easier. What do you guys see here? A rabbit? How many see a rabbit? Raise hands. You see a rabbit? How many sees a bird, duck? Duck? How many can see both? Both. So you see, this is the both. If you want to look at a rabbit, then the rabbit is facing this way. This is the mouth of the rabbit, the ears of the rabbit. And if you want to see a duck, then it's facing this way. These are the beak, this is the eye of the duck, facing this way. Right? Everyone can see both, right? So what's happening? So there is this philosopher, one of the very important philosophers of modern history, Ludwig Wittgenstein. He includes this in his very famous book. It's one of the most famous book of 20th century philosophy. He says that there are two types of seeing. There are two types of seeing. One thing is, if you only see a rabbit, then you're seeing that I see a rabbit, period. I see it this way. Right? That's what many times there's this confusion of LGBT thing. I see it this way. That's it. Khalas, end of the story. There is no other way. There is no other way. This is the way I see, and this is where I end my discussion. This is dogma. This is dogma. I see it this way, that's it. I see a rabbit, khalas, there's nothing more to discuss about. I see a rabbit. So this is a rabbit. This is a rabbit, a claim. But there's a now that you get aware that no, I understand how people can see a duck also. Now you will say, I see it as a rabbit. I see it as a rabbit. And I can understand how someone will see it as a duck. Everyone's following me, right? Now I see it as a rabbit. So still after inshallah I'll show you these paradigms, our children or we ourselves will be able to differentiate, okay, I see it as this. But Islam is saying something else. And Islam is correct, of course, because Quran and Hadith, we've believed Islam to be correct. I'm not going to prove that right now, but we have to understand that, okay, this is what they see, but now this is what is the truth. Right? You'll be able to make that difference. And that is very fundamental thing. The atheists will come to you with their arguments, very strong arguments. The modernists will come with you with very strong arguments. The feminists will come to you with very strong arguments. Egalitarian system, society must be all absolute egalitarian. You'll come very strong arguments, but right away you understand that is a perspective. That is a perspective. Islam differs. Islam does not have to be with them. Many times they will try to make Islam conform to their ideology, right? And trust me when I tell you, I've gone through a amount of research that I would not suggest anyone to go through, right? Research purposes, quote unquote. But I've seen things on Reddit, right? That's where they're at. So there are these subreddits, right? Subreddits of LGBT, quote unquote, Muslims, right? Subreddit of them. They exist. The reason why I'm telling you this, because they exist, and we should understand the threat. They exist who try to conform, because they cannot make this difference. That no, this is it, but I also want to be a Muslim, so I will make that fit this narrative, no matter if the shoe fits or not. No matter if it fits or not, I'm going to make it fit. Right? So there is the subreddit I'm talking about. So, bi'ithnillah, I had to go across it, or had to go through it. Of course, then what? So I went through it, and the pinned post is a document, a doc file of over 60 pages. Over 60 pages of Quranic verses, and they make the claim these Quranic verses proves LGBT in the Quran. These verses are proving LGBT. And most of these verses, Allah loves everyone, and there's most of these verses about the love of Allah. You see, Allah loves everyone. Allah created you. Allah loves you, even though you're like this. Right? These like literally shubuhat, doubts that are feeding in our children's mind, right, from the very young. Because look, our children, they're growing up in this society, right? They're growing up in this society like, yes, love for all, hatred for none, or love is love, and make love, not war. All these like slogans, right? Americans, mashallah, you guys like slogans. Like, I think most of the Canadian slogans come from here, like slogans, acronyms. So, like all these slogans, because it's very easy to process, right? So when our children, they grow up, like, yeah, what's the wrong? What's the wrong with? Even though they might not be feeling like that, but yeah, what's the? I see these two consenting adults. That's why there's a whole subreddit group, and with thousands of people, right? So the threat exists. So this is because we're not able to differentiate between seeing this and seeing it as. And the final one, and I've saved the best for the last. Whoever can get this, well, I don't have any price right now, but inshallah, let's see. Okay, if you already know, then you can say. I think I showed this in class, so you can say. So what is this? What is this? Just dots? Map of a treasure. Where is the treasure located? No, I'm joking, it's not a map. See, what is this? Just dots, random dots? Random dots? Landscape? Yes. Okay, that's creative. Okay, I'll give you one small hint. It is an animal. MashaAllah. You actually saw it? You see a cow? Or that was the first animal that came in your mind? Yes. A hippopotamus? No. A what? Yes. A horse. Creative. Okay, mashallah, we have very creative answers, so I'll give you the correct answer. It's a cow, right? Who says cow? It is a cow. You guys see a cow? Okay, now the idea is this, right? Pay very close attention to this image. Pay very close attention to this image. I will show you the cow right away in a second, but pay very close attention. Right? Picture this image in your mind, because you will not be able to see it again. Right? The moment I show you where the cow is located, you will not be able to unsee it, no matter what. If I see this, I don't see dots anymore. I just see the cow. You will not be able to unsee it. Right? That's the beauty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how He has created the mind. Once we understand the difference into paradigms, then a problem comes up, we'll say, oh, this is atheistic paradigm. Take it away. Right? The moment we see a different paradigm, no, this is not Islamic paradigm, take it away. Right? This is not the Islamic way, take it away. We'll understand right away that this is not what Islam says. Even though we don't know where it is exactly, but we'll be able to identify right away. Everyone's ready to see the cow? Anyone see it? Raise of hands. You guys see it properly? MashaAllah. You see it? MashaAllah. Usually the children are very quick in this. It's usually the adults who are a bit slower. Okay, so these are the two eyes of the cow. This is the big nose. This is where the moo moo. These are the ears. This is the forehead. Right? You guys heard this aha, this like, oh yes, I get it. Right? That's what it does when we understand Islamic perspective also. Right? To make it easier, inshallah, I'll open this. They're the same image. They're the same image. See over here? Everyone can see it now? The forehead. Right? Now, once you're able to see it, now promise me, can you go back and look at the dots anymore? Can you see the dots anymore? Can you see the dots? You won't be able to see the dots. You just won't come. Bring your mind to see the dots. You will not be able to see it. Right? You will not be able to see the dots. Maybe you can pinpoint, you can just look at one dot, but when you look at it holistically, you'll see a cow. Right away. Right away you'll see a cow. Right? Everyone see it? Yes? So moving on. And that is what we're talking about right now, is paradigm shift. You are able to see it in something in the beginning, it's not clear. Right? It's unclear, it's just dots, it's just scribbles. Right? I had met one of my good friends. He says that, okay, you just do any scribble and I'll turn it into a proper drawing. Right? I don't know if there are some artists like that here. So I just did like scribbles, and mashallah, he came up and made a nice river. Right? So we see something and they see something else. Right? So we may see scribbles. Right? But when we're able to shift that paradigm, like, aha, now I understand. So inshallah, we'll go through only 3 of these paradigm shifts. Only 3 of these paradigm shifts. But before going into the 3 paradigm shifts, we have to understand why it is even important for us to know these paradigm shifts. Why is it important for us? So, let's do this. There's something called code switching, right? Code switching. And now I'm going into why it is important for us to understand the Islamic paradigm. And in other words, the danger in adopting the opposite paradigm, or the paradigm which is not Islamic, the danger of that. So what happens is this concept of code switching. Switching between 2 codes, right? It's more of a technical term, but it can be used in this. So how it works is a typical average person, a Muslim kid, he usually goes to public school, and inshallah he comes to the maktab also. Inshallah we should make an intention to send at the very least to send our kids to the maktab. Right? So there's maktab. In the night, there's evening maktab classes. Right? There's maktab classes here? Like daily, right? Okay. So everyone should make intention to send our kids to the maktab. That is one of the fundamental things. And that is the most important thing that we can do. Right? If we're younger, then we should make intention that we'll send our kids into these maktabs. This is one of the most fundamental things. So you have children that are going to schools and they're attending the masjid, mashallah. So what happens is that when you are going to one school, then they are taught the secular worldview. They start adopting the secular worldview. And they start adopting the secular worldview. And when they come to the masjid, they adopt the Islamic worldview. Right? And truly, they adopt the Islamic worldview. Now what happens is like they're clashing between 2 worldviews. They clash between 2 worldviews. To give you an example, right? If you speak your native language at home, right? You speak your native language at home, and you go to school and you speak what language? The English language, right? Now there will come a point where you're able to speak both languages. Right, you're with siblings, there are siblings over here. You will notice when you were 10 years old, you used to speak with the same language that you spoke with your parents. Right? But when you're 19, now you start speaking English. One language dominates the other language. Right? And after generations, one language will just die out. There will not be that language anymore. But when you lose the language, it's not that big of a deal. But when it comes to worldview, then when one worldview overpowers and dominates the other, that is the end of Islam right there. And I've met this person myself, right? I've met this person myself. You guys would know this. In Australia, you guys know who built the railroads in Australia? The railroads of Australia, one of the main railroads that connects most of the Australian the continent. You know who built the railroads? Who's Afghan Muslims? Yes, Afghan Muslims. They're the ones who built those railroads. These people, the Australians or the colonizers, they brought these Afghan Muslim from there and they built these railroads. I spoke to one of their descendants. They came in 1920 and I was there, I spoke with him. And he told me himself that from my grandfathers, because like a couple of 9 generations back, or like couple 5 or some generations back, and he says that when my grandparents came, there were 10 brothers. 10 brothers, like proper brothers, were brought from Afghanistan to build these railroads. 10 brothers. And from all the 10 brothers, only my father's lineage is Muslim. All the 9 brothers are Murtad. Their names will be Muslim names, the last names, but first name will be non-Muslim name. Every single one of them are Murtad. What happens? Is the clash of these worldview. Clash of this worldview. We do not give importance in teaching our way. Right? There is no importance in teaching the Islamic way. What else do you expect? What else do you expect to happen? Right? That's why the focus is not to send our children. Right? I'll say this also. I just mentioned that we should send our children to maktab. We should go beyond that. Our focus, and I'll say this, our purpose should not be to send our children to maktab. Our main purpose should be that to give my children that tarbiyah, that education, that he sends his children to the maktab. Everyone's following me? That he sends his children, that my grandchildren can go to the maktab. Right? The idea is not, I will send my children to, oh, I'm such a good father, I'm sending my kids to the maktab. No, the idea should be, how can these kids that I'm raising send their own kids to the maktab? That is why when we think about these generations down the line, that is, we're protecting Islam in our generations, right? In our lineage, inshallah. So this is the concept of code switching. And now, inshallah, when we come back to the 3 paradigm shifts. So this is where we inshallah will start tackling about, until now it was more of an introduction. And through this, you should be able to understand, if not combat or if not refute, and that is not everyone's piece of cake. I would not advise actually anyone to even be in this field to refute and all that. It's very dangerous. But at the very least, at least we understand. At least we can tell our children that when they come, we do not know the answer, but we can say, you see, this good question, let's ask a shaykh. A very good question, let's ask the shaykh. At least we can tell our children, you know, whatever you learn at school, very good, but there is an Islamic way. Right? Let's find out what Islam says about this. Right? You learned this in school, very good. Let's find out what Islam says about this. So let's find out over here what Islam says. Number 1, there is these labels, right? Labels. Bi, gay, lesbian, trans, these labels, right? These labels. What do these labels mean? Right? How come no other culture even has words to correspond to these labels? No other culture has words to correspond to these labels. We can think of our own language. Do we have words for gay or these words that actually truly translates to that? Right? We will think we'll not have. Right? Not that truly translates, maybe we made up, but not that truly translates to it. Even in Arabic, there is no word for that. Right? So how come no other culture and language have words like these? Even the word sexuality, even that word is not found in literature. Right? For example, let's give you an example. If you're walking down these streets of Laurel, I don't know if there was a civilization here 100 years ago. I think there was. But let's say you're walking down the road over here, and you ask the person who's just walking, and you ask him 100 years ago, right? 100 years. You take a time machine and you could travel back 100 years. And you ask him, sir, are you straight? What do you think he's going to say? And just 100 years back, like, sir, are you straight? What do you think he's going to say? What does that mean? What do you mean by straight? Like straight as an arrow? Like What are you talking about? Right? Yeah, I'm walking straight. Like, what do you talk about? Like, go and read his back. Like, ask a normal person, are you straight? Like, what do you mean? Right? There was no word for that. The idea did not even exist. But here's the fun part. The idea did not exist. Did the action exist? Action existed. We have Greeks also doing it. We have Lut alayhi salam, that whole poem of Lut alayhi salam. So the action existed. But did they identify with being this or being that? Right? No one identified. The action certainly existed. Action existed, but no one identified it. So now that's the paradigm shift. Now we see the Islam. What does Islam have to say? What is it called? Drum roll? No, drum roll. So the first paradigm shift. The first paradigm shift. Sexual behavior was something that you did, an action, never something that you were, an identity. It was always looked at as an action, not an identity. Not an identity. We will do zina, right? So our group is called the groups of zina. Never that exists. Ever. Right? Never did it become an identity, it was always an action. Right? We have this fantasy. We have this fetish. Or so we call ourselves from this fantasy. Right? Our group is called this group. Never in the history we found that. Never in the history. It was always looked as an action, never an identity. And what do we see now? Action turned into identity in the blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye, action turned into identity. Or someone feeling turned into identity. Let alone action, desire turned into identity. If a person has this orientation, that's it, you're gay. Labeled as identity. Your identity is this. Right? That never existed. But the force in the West wants you to believe that it's universal, it's natural, like it's like you can phase in and out. Right? It's very anything that you want, you can do it. It's a spectrum. It's a binary, non-binary. All these words, all these big words. So then you're not natural. If you go against it, then you're not natural. You're denying reality. So that's what only the first paradigm shift. Only the first paradigm shift. Second paradigm shift. Islam. Now we start with Islamic paradigm. We first start with Islamic paradigm. In Islam, you say that these following things should line up. These things should line up. Your biological sex should line up. Your gender identity should line up. Gender expression should line up. Your orientation should line up. These four things should line up. That's the normal way. Your biological sex will be what you feel. What you feel will be how you express. How you express will be who you're oriented towards. These things should line up. Right? That is the Islamic way. They are meant to line up. They should line up. But we understand that it will not line up for everyone. So they are meant to line up, but we have understand, okay, some people will have gender dysphoria or gender identity disorder. We understand that. But it does not change from the fact that these four should line up. Right? If you're born with 4 fingers, you will not see that the concept of fingers is a social construct. Fingers are a social construct. I have 5 fingers. I like his 4 fingers better. Can you cut off my finger? I just like the way he has like 4 fingers. Can you cut off my finger? Right? What would that be? No, it's a social construct. That is the same thing we're doing here. These 4 things should line up, but we understand it will not line up. Doesn't mean the whole concept is a social construct. Right? Now we look at Western paradigm. You might already guess, what is the Western paradigm? They are not meant to line up. They were never meant to line up. And this is where I go back with my laser light. The gender-bred person. Let's notice something. Let's notice this image. Notice this image. What is the first peculiar thing that stands out? The first thing that stands out. To me, the very first thing that stood out when I first saw this was the art. The color, the writing. You see, is this made for an academic PhD graduate student? Is this made for doctors having surgeries, just doing surgeries upon patients? Is this made for them? Right? Who is this made for? Children's. It is made for children's. And please don't scan this QR code because you will go to their website and give them more views. But this is literally from their own website. And this is from their own website, made for who? For children. And this is not for adults. Just look at, and that's something that you will find in this community, like just colors and like rainbow and all this. Now mashallah, they just hijack the rainbow. You can't even wear a rainbow color, nothing. Like I want to buy some stuff for my daughters, I can't even buy something rainbow color, right? Or else I'll get exposed. Look at this, Imam is talking about LGBT and buying these clothes. Right? So you have, look at the colors, right? Look at the colors. So you have, now they separate 4 things. What did Islam do? It gathered 4 things. Right? Islam said these 4 things should line up. What do these people they do? Right away, they're not meant to line up, and separate them into identity, your orientation here, your sex right here, and your expression right here. What does that mean? Identity is a spectrum. You can be man, you can be gender queer, you can be woman, you can be over here, you can be over here. Someday you're pansexual, someday you're asexual, someday you're bisexual, someday you're a non-binary, someday you're all these, right? It's like all pansexual, anything that you name up, anything. It's all over here. Or whatever, you can have your what do you call there's birthday reveal parties, something here. And so you can have those gender reveal parties. You can have gender reveal parties when you're as grown up. You can have these gender reveal parties. Now I feel like I'm a boy, I'm a man. Right? So you can have right over here. But this has nothing to do with what's here. Right? So biological sex, you can be female, you can be male, you can be intersex, but it has nothing to do. Expression has nothing to do with your sex or your orientation. Nothing. You can be androgynous, you can act like a male, you can act like a female. It's okay. It's a man, you make him, it's okay, he can cry, a boy can cry, show emotions, you can start showing emotions. These things, my dear brothers, for example, just this very thing that I just said at last, men can cry, right? Let your boys show emotion. Right? That is one of the pro tips, medical tips. I don't know about medical, but that is one of the, especially if you go online, that is one of the main ideas. Like, let your boys cry. Right? Let your boys cry. Let them show emotion. Let them be like that. No, right? That is not the Islamic perspective. That is not the Islamic perspective. We should teach our men to be men. We should to our boys to be, inshallah, when they grow up, when they're baligh, now will be men. Right? That is the Islamic perspective. Not that, yes, let them show your emotion, this or that. That is not Islamic. That is genuinely un-Islamic, because where would that lead? Where would that lead? It will lead to this ambiguity. It will lead to this ambiguity. And where does this ambiguity come from? From the blurring of the line between sexes. The blurring of the line between male and female. The whole blurring of the line happened in 1950s, 60s. Right? Where male and female, they started exchanging their work. Now, because men were in war in Vietnam and other places, there were World War I, II. Now women were coming into the workforce. Right? So now the dresses were being seen. The line slowly was being blurred. Right? The line was being blurred. If I can be a man, if I can be a woman, I can earn bread also. What's stopping me to go work? What's stopping me? Well, if you're a man, you can change diapers also. Right? You can also change diapers. You can also cook. You can also clean the dishes. Now cleaning the dishes is not looked as a favor, but looked as a responsibility. And then they will give, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to a broom. He used to clean the house. This example will be given. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to clean the house. Was this his responsibility? Was this daily chores? Waliyadu billah. Right? People won't say that. No, that was not his daily chores. It was whatever he did, it was good out of goodwill. Right? It was out of goodwill, not out of responsibility. Right? These lines slowly start getting blurred. Now if the man is changing diaper, of course it's responsibility, it's his son also. It's not only my son, it's your son also. Right? But no, there are these differences. Right? There are these if I'm not saying, look again, I'm not saying that the men are not allowed to these things. They're all allowed, right? And we should also advise our men to do that. But out of, not necessarily responsibility, but out of help and favor. Right? And the women folk need to understand also that too. Because when we start blurring these lines, that men can do this, women can do that, then like, okay, I'm a woman. Because the lines are so blurred now. Now it's interchangeable. Now we created this spectrum. We created this spectrum. Right here, gender expression. Right? We created this spectrum. We've created, you can phase in over here, if you, because men and women are same, are practically same, okay, just become men today. Or just become a woman today. Right? So no, that's why Islam has a very strict difference between genders. It comes back to these gender roles. Very strict differences between gender roles. Quran is unequivocal, it's very clear that men and women are not the same. They're not the same. We are not saying that we're not, of course they're the same in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the reward they do reward, there's no salary gap, or there's no that when it comes in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The same worship they do, it depends on the quality. Right? It depends on the quality. But that is not a concept that we can't even talk about these things openly. Right? It's just, even right now I'm talking, I'm sure some of you guys are uncomfortable. But because of this discomfort, we get to this point. Because in 1800s or 1980s, right, when these things were being popular, no one spoke up. That's why we're getting this problem. Right? Because we're so comfortable and speaking about, yes, men and women are equal. That's why we're getting this problem. We're here right now because of those problems. Right? Because we didn't address those problems then, that's why we are here right now. Right? So these are the differences that Islam says that no, they're supposed to be the same thing, but no, these people no. All different. Your gender, whatever you, it's all internal. Nothing external. You can phase in and out. Whatever you want to do, you can do. However you want to behave, you can behave. Whatever you want to wear, you can wear. Of course, right? Because men and women are equal. Whatever you want to wear today, you can wear. No one's stopping you. Right? No one's putting any rules on you who's to control you. But Islam has a very strict ruling on cross-dressing. Right? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "La'anat, curse upon the woman who wears the clothing of a man, and curse upon the man who wears the clothing of a woman." Very clear warnings. Curse upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon these people. Very clear warnings. Another warning, like those people who behave like the woman behaving like men, and men behaving like women. That is also curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon these people. Very clear warnings. But we want to ignore these things. Right? So this is why, my dear brothers and sisters, we need to understand what Islam says about these things, about these issues. We need to understand from the fundamental level. From the fundamental level, how Islam deals with these gender roles. Right? This is a fard upon us. Yes, I will tell you this is a fard upon us. Because Rasulullah ﷺ said, "Talabul ilmi faridatun ala kulli Muslim." That seeking knowledge is fard upon every Muslim. Which type of knowledge? The knowledge that concerns you. The knowledge that concerns you is fard upon you to know. If you're getting married, it is fard upon you to know how to get married. It is fard upon you. If you're going to the washroom, it is fard upon you to know how to go to the washroom. Right? These things we're dealing with every day. Right? If we're married, right? Gender roles is an everyday issue. It is fard upon us to learn what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about genders. So let's continue. So they will say, I feel this internally, therefore I should be able to allow to act on it. Right? My gender expression, my gender identity, my sexual orientation, all mine. It's all mine. I can do whatever I want to do with my body. But then how you answer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how you answer? Allah says that it is, so Sharia says that Sharia regulates this. It is not up to us to reduce it only to psychology. Who said to only reduce it to psychology? Right? That is not the Islamic perspective. That is not the Islamic worldview to reduce it to psychology. That's not what our conception of the human being is. To begin with, it is not the conception of what a human being is. And that is literally taking a foreign ideology into the worldview of Islam. And they will say it's a choice. So just a Quran verse. وَمَا كَانَ لِمُؤْمِنٍ وَلَا مُؤْمِنَةٍ. It is not for a believing man or a believing woman when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed something, has decreed a matter, to have any choice other than other choice in that matter. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed this, then you do not have any choice. There is no choice in this. There is no choice. And finally, and maybe the most importantly, identity. Identity. That is one of the biggest things. And even it is very scary that even for Muslims, even Muslim, the word Muslim has become more of an identity. I am a Muslim because I'm not a Christian. I am a Muslim because I'm not an atheist. It just became an identity. Right? Not that I'm a Muslim, so I have to pray 5 times salat. I'm a Muslim, so I have to wear hijab. I'm a Muslim, so I have to give zakat. I'm a Muslim, so I cannot mix with other gender, opposite gender. You understand my point, right? It is no longer this. Is the reason why I'm Muslim is because I'm not a Christian, right? That's the reducing to the identity. That's the identity politics. Everything is about identity. I'm a Muslim because I'm not a Christian, and the only reason I'm Muslim is because I was born into Islam. I was born into Islam, and I'm not a Christian. I'm a Muslim. It becomes reducing it to identity, and that's why it's also in this gender ideology we see is mostly built upon identity. So Western paradigms, what it does is it separates 3 things that were meant to be together. Separates is like splitting the atom. So there's an atom and you split the atom. So it was something that was strongly joined together, bound together, and you split it. So these things, your sex, reproduction, and marriage were bound together. Right now, in our locality or our culture in the West, you can have intercourse with whoever you want, not necessarily with someone who you're married to. You can reproduce with someone who you have intercourse with. You don't necessarily need to reproduce with someone you're married to. You can marry who you're having intercourse with. You can marry all things, like they're separate. They're not part of each other, right? But of course, Islam says they're together. You have intercourse with someone who you're going to reproduce and someone you're going to reproduce. Of course, you're married to that person. Right? These are all conceptual things. But no, they separate these things. And now they amalgamate, right? They make into one 3 things that were meant to be separate. 3 things that were meant to be separate. What are those 3 things? Desires, actions, and identity. These 3 things were meant to be separate. And that is the fundamental teaching of Islam. That your desires should be different than your actions. Just because you desire something doesn't mean you need to act upon it. And even if you act upon it, doesn't mean you become and that becomes your identity. Everyone's following me? These 3 things were separate, but they're brought together. That just because you desire, it becomes you have to act upon it because you desire it. Why are you fighting against yourself? Act upon it. And of course, you act upon it, it becomes you're labeled as that. Your desire flows, your actions flow from your desires. Whatever you desire, you have to act upon it. So morality thrown out of the window. Don't care what is the morality. Of course, if you're not harming anyone, you're not doing any zulm, you're not having any type of, it's safe, right? It's safe, everything is safe, it's consensual, then go for it. Right? What's morality? What's moral? What's not moral? Who are you to judge? Like all these things, right? Go for it. If desire is present, everyone consents, then action is unobjectionable. And then when a person does the action, an entire identity is built upon that. An entire identity is built upon it. In the Islamic paradigm, action should be different than desires. Action should be different than desire. That is the very fundamental teaching of Islam. Very fundamental. If I'm walking outside and I see a $100 bill, the Benjamin, right, the famous Benjamin. I see why the Benjamin is Benjamin. I hold it like, okay, this is the Benjamin. And the Canadian, the $100, like what is it? Just like it doesn't feel real. And the American Benjamin is American Benjamin. So I see this Benjamin on the ground, right? The $100 bill. Right? Why don't I pick it up? Right? Not because I don't want to pick it up. Right? There's always a desire. That desire exists. But you don't do it because Islam protects you from that. Islam prevents you from that. Deen prevents you from that. Right? So action is different than desire. And that is a very fundamental Islamic perspective, Islamic concept that your action should be different than the desires. Just because you desire something does not mean you act on it, let alone show pride in it. And the problem is the LGBT, and that's the main point, have turned an urge a desire, an urge, into an identity. Turned an urge into an identity. So they inflated the significance of homosexual desires into an identity. So they conflated into an identity to justify their actions. Right? This is a very heavy sentence, right? We should be able to comprehend and grasp this sentence. They inflated or conflated the significance of homosexual desires into an action to justify, into an identity to justify their actions. To justify their actions. If it is who you are, then why are you fighting against yourself? Affirm it. Why are you fighting against yourself? Therefore, those who are fighting against this urge, they're not fighting against it, they're fighting against this urge. Right? You have this urge of stealing. You're not gonna, okay, there's something called kleptomania. Kleptomania. It's just when you like seeing things burn. I just want to put things on fire. Just like to see things burn. It's an actual disorder. So what do you do then? Can you just put things into, can you have fun and just, there's a significant level of no, your desires will not control your actions. Right? You will control your actions, not your desires. So but they were fighting against this urge, and now they made these people think that they're fighting against themselves, when they were actually fighting for themselves against a desire they wish they didn't have. And anyone who critiques their actions, they think that their identity is undermined, and that is where the main problem comes in. Right? That is that is where the main problem comes in. When you see an alcoholic, he's drinking alcohol. He's drinking. So you tell him, brother, he's Muslim, or brother, or even non-Muslim. In Islam, is drinking alcohol is impermissible. What will he say? Like, okay, all right. Or maybe he's Muslims. Okay, it's okay. Make dua for my hidayah or whatever. To say that, will he say that I undermine my existence? You think that I do not exist? I exist. You've undermined my identity. Will they say that? No, they will not say that, because it's different. Identity is different. But if you were to go to these affirming people and you will tell them, you see, this is a sin in Islam. In Islam, this behavior is a sin. Like, you've attacked my existence. I do not, you've undermined me. You want me to die. You want to eradicate me. Is this what you want? Is this what Islam is? They will be very, very quick to just the reason why we will not have an answer is because we do not understand the Islamic perspective. Right? We will not say, no, Islam is not saying that. Islam is just talking about this action. This action is impermissible. This action is impermissible. And you are building this action into an identity. That is not my problem. That is not my mistake that you build it, you conflate it into an identity. Right? That is not my issue. That is your worldview. That is your issue that you guys conflated the two. Islam differentiates between identity and actions and desires. Right? That is a very fundamental concept of Islam. Desires are different than actions. Actions different than identity. So my dear brothers, these are, or sisters and sisters, these are a couple of things, points that we should really take home with us. Right? Even if you don't remember the whole presentation, but you do remember one thing, that Islam has its distinct understanding. Islam has its own way. Islam has its own theology. Islam has its own worldview. Islam has its own way of looking at reality. Right? And Islam does not need to submit to these other worldviews. Islam does not need to submit to these other worldviews. Islam is truth. Islam is the truth. It's al-haq. It's al-haq. Right? And the more you study Islam, the more you study these fundamentals of Islam, the more you study these beauty of Islamic difference and gender difference and these difference, the more you start appreciate Islam. The more you, it's just natural. Because Islam is a deen of fitrah. Is a deen of innate disposition. Is a deen of fitrah. Is a deen of what our desire, what our hearts want at the core. Because when a person starts in this, right, inshallah, these will be my closing. I had hoped to at least do some of the fallacies, because these fallacies are very common, especially these last ones. There was a viral teacher video that went pretty viral, And you guys heard this in Edmonton. I actually went to Edmonton to present this, and they had told me, the crowd told me that the school that I'm actually refuting in this video is like not too far away from where I'm presenting. So there was this very viral video of a teacher that was screaming at Mansoor. So she was, bichara, this Mansoor, he skipped the Pride Parade, and this teacher caught him. So and this actually happened in my Montreal, where I'm from. One child, because the reason I'm saying this is June is right around the corner, so we just want to really understand that what these things are actually happening in schools. And this I'm talking about like experience, my own city. So this student, Muslim student, did not go to school that day because they literally had this Pride Parade. He did not go to school. Or no, sorry, they had this cross-dressing that day. So he didn't go to school, naturally. The next day, and I'm not kidding, I'm not making this up, this actually happened in my city. The next day, the teacher brings the student in front of the entire class. And then, very young, like 9-10-year-old, like elementary. Then she puts on him girl's a dress. And then she asks, what's the problem? You feel any different? You see how normal this is? And you see, why did you skip the school for this? So it's not a big deal. Right? These things, my dear brothers and sisters, are actually happening in schools. Right? If we will not educate our children, right? If we will not educate ourselves, and we allow to be in the system without understanding the system, we will be devoured by the system. Right? We will be done. And that's the example of the code switching, right? The two paradigms. It was the same thing as happened to the Afghanis back in the history, Australian history. That actually happened. It's right in front of you guys. It's right in front of you. Right, so this is our responsibility to educate ourselves first and foremost, so that we can qu anfusakum ahlikum nara, that protect yourself and protect your family from fire. That is our responsibility. It is kullukum ra'in wa kullukum mas'ulun an ra'iyatihi. Every single one of you sitting over here, every single one of you, male, female, children, every single one of you are responsible. Every single one of you is a responsible individual. And you are responsible of your own flock. You are responsible of your friend. You're responsible of your parent. You're responsible of your family. You're responsible of your wife, of your children, of your husband. You're responsible. Right? And this is the need of the time. This is the need of the time. I'm not telling you to learn everything that has to do with this, but at the very least, understand or explain our children that we have an Islamic approach to things. Right? You will go to university, your teachers will be professors, they have their careers into secular education, they've given their lives into secular education, they will not come to class and teach you about the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and why Quran is the truth. Right? If we are sending our children to these universities, we should equip them properly. We should equip them properly, because then it will come by in our own hands. We should really equip them properly. Because this is not Baytul Hikmah back in the days of Abbasid Empire. Right? This is not the Ma'mur's Baytul Hikmah. I don't know if you guys know about the golden age of Islam. This is not that golden age of Islam. Right? People say, oh, everyone who goes to university, everyone who advances intellectually starts leaving Islam. And that's a very common misconception that people may have. The more you advance in university, the more likely you are to leave Islam. Right? You've heard this argument, that the more intellectual you get, the more likely you will be to leave Islam. So Islam is false. You see, because the people following Islam just because they are not intellectually advanced. That is an argument that we hear every so often. Right? The reason why you're Muslim, because you're just not intellectually advanced. You see all these professors, doctors, oh subhanAllah, these PhDs. See why they are not Muslims? Because they are intellectually advanced. Right? So that is the very wrong conception that we have placed in our minds. Why? Why is that the case? Because we've played, and why does it happen? It may be truth. It may be the truth. But why is that the case? Is because our children are going from the year 1, grade 1, kindergarten. You guys call kindergarten? Kindergarten, from the very first time, or maybe even daycare. Are you putting them in is that maktab class? Is that an Islamic university? Is that a Darul Ulum? Right? Is that a Darul Ulum, or is that a University of Maryland? Is that a Darul Ulum of Maryland, Darul Ulum? Right? No, it's not. Put these same professors, bring this challenge. Put these same professors in Baytul Hikmah in 1300. Put these same professors in Baytul Hikmah in 900th century, in 9th century. Same professors, and tell me if they come out like that. Right? Tell me if they come out like that. Right? So khair, inshallah. I don't want to lengthen too much. Inshallah, we'll. If you guys have any questions, inshallah, I'll be here after Isha. So if you have any questions, inshallah, you can ask me personally. Subhanallah bihamdi, subhanakallah bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin.